Morning to talk more about the results of last night's special election. We have our political analysts, Kathy Abernathy representing the Republican side, Marisa Wood representing the Democratic side. Good morning to you both. Thanks so much for joining me.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right, let's just start with you, Marisa, because of course you were a candidate yourself in this race, and of course it was narrowed down to the top two vote getters in the primary. I just want to get your thoughts on this and your thoughts on Fong's comfortable lead right now ahead of Mike Boudreau.
I think that this is an accurate expression of voter turnout. Unfortunately, there wasn't a large turnout, and the majority of the folks that turned out for this election was even lower because so many didn't know that we were even having the election. And the power here is that the majority of the folks that were voting were the 65 plus age group. That's where most of them are coming from. So you have the same people who are voting and making these decisions time and time again. And I think that's really the issue here.
Kathy, this is the third time we've done this year. And do you think that people in this district are starting to get a little bit of voter fatigue, if you will, trying to figure out and go through, and it is going through the process of trying to figure out who's going to replace Kevin McCarthy, not only for the remainder of this term, but then of course we've got his regular or just a normal term coming up as well. Do you think voters were starting to get a little bit of fatigue here?
You know, it's interesting. Kern County thinks this is so unique to have special elections. There are probably 80 special elections go on in this state every year, and there's many different reasons why. But people change office and things happen, and it's not unusual. It's not unusual across the country. So I find it kind of humorous to be concerned that the voters are overwhelmed because, my goodness, we hand them a ballot in their home and they just have to vote and turn it in. But the people that vote care about the issues, and a lot of people just watch the world go by. And the voters certainly, they knew about this election. There was a lot of phone calls, a lot of television ads, a lot of signs. But most important, I think the people that are impacted and think about what's going on in Congress, they were anxious to vote, and that's who turned out.
Yeah, okay, and of course the candidates in this race, both Republican, Vince Fong, Mike Boudreau, and 17 minutes after the polls closed, the Associated Press called the race for Vince. Mike Boudreau agrees with that. We talked to him earlier, and he said that, of course, he would, he's going to evaluate, but he's going to focus on endorsing Vince Fong come November. I want to ask you, though, with something like this, when you have two candidates like Vince Fong, Mike Boudreau, Mike having a little bit more name recognition up to the north of Kern County, Vince having a little more recognition here in Kern County. Were the results surprising to see at this hour? We've got kind of the 60-40 split in favor of Vince.
At this hour, I mean, because they were all mail-in ballots virtually, this new system that I don't agree with. I don't think it's good that some people voted for 30 days ago and didn't see much of a campaign, and then campaigns go, or an issue, had one of them been an incumbent in Congress, you could have campaigned on that issue. I wish people were voting more at one time so they all had the same information. But I don't think there's anything unusual. Yes, Vince is well known. He's been in the legislature. Kern County has a little bit more population than Fresno, but basically Fresno was the battleground in this race. Right. And they, of course, Vince Fong had support of a lot of local Fresno people. So did Boudreau. But ultimately, I think the fact that Vince was from a legislative body with a voting record, contrasting with a person in law enforcement who's basically the boss of his sheriffs, it's a different background in terms of what people thought would be best in Congress.
Marisa, I got to ask you, because as a Democrat, you see in this race there are two Republicans going head to head. How does a Democrat vote in this race? Did you yourself vote?
Absolutely.
And how do Democrats look at this and say, I've got two Republicans on the ballot? How do you go about voting?
Again, personally, I vote the way I vote every time, regardless of whether there's a Democrat or a Republican in the race. I vote on character. I vote on conviction, and I vote educated in terms of what does this person present. As far as a Democrat voting for only two Republicans, I encouraged everyone to vote. And again, I think Kathy has misspoken when she says only the people that care vote. That's not true, and I think it's dangerous for us to negate all of the voters who feel like they're not listened to, like their vote doesn't matter, and that's why they have this apathy. And I think it's an issue, and I think it's very comfortable to say, well, only the people who care vote. That's not true. I think we need to reach out to those people, like the Democrats, who this time might have said, who do I vote for? Because there's only Republicans. The important thing is your vote is your voice. You've got to vote. You've got to make your voice heard. And to just discount and say only the people that care vote is, I think, highly unfair.
So in
very
November, do you think the Democratic Party needs to put more of a focus on voting in this district, despite the fact that it is going to be only Republicans on the ballot?
I think so. I think we need to just put out to everyone to vote. Again, whether you're there's a good substantial number of independent voters here in this district as well. I believe it's about 29%. Those all play into effect too. It's getting those voters engaged. That's what's missing, regardless of whether it's Democrat or Republican. We've got to get those voters engaged.
Kathy, we're running low on time, but I got to ask you really quick, because there is still a lot of question on, like, okay, so we had the special election. The next time we, see Vince on the ballot, it's going to be in the general. It's going to be in the November election. What happens between, from a political, strategist position, what happens between now and then, between now and November?
Well, in about 2 weeks, Vince Vaughn will be sworn into Congress. He will be a U.S. congressman. He'll be voting and have a record, and that will change, I think, the dynamics of the race in November, and people will recognize that that's their congressman. Just to be clear, my point is you have a choice to vote. There's no gun at your head. Everybody got handed a ballot in their home, a live ballot. They didn't have to even go to the polls. If they chose not to vote, that's their choice. But people that were really concerned about getting Congress back on track, facing the border issue more seriously, they made the effort to vote. But it takes no effort now to vote. It's in your home. It's got a prepaid stamp on it. It couldn't be easier. They were hounded with phone calls and campaign activity. So some people choose not to vote. That's their right too.
All right, and of course the special election wrapping up yesterday. The next time we'll be talking about this, of course, is in November. Thank you so much for coming in this morning. Do appreciate your analysis.